As I record these words, the London Chess Classic for 2012 has just concluded. It has been a fantastic tournament, probably the most successful of the series so far, and it was won outright by Magnus Carlsen. Vladimir Kramnik came second, and Hikaru Nakamura and Michael Adams tied for third, irrespective of whether you use the London scoring system with 3 points for a win or the traditional scoring system of 1, half and 0. There were quite a number of extraordinary games in this tournament, and the game I'm going to feature for the BCM Game of the Month, January 2013, is a game I did not feature on my own YouTube channel. It's the game between Luke McShane playing white and McShane-Aronian playing black. As recordings on the BCM channel are limited to 15 minutes, we're going to have to scoot along because this is a long game, and there is, believe me, a lot to get through. Well, McShane is white, and he opens with the Ruy Lopez. Black plays a6, bishop a4, the main line, knight f6 castles, bishop e7, and now this little move d3. This is the supposed new twist designed to avoid the Marshall Gambit. Of course, this is a move borrowed from Steinitz. Steinitz used to play regularly an early d3 in the Lopez back in the 1800s. But of course there he hadn't castled. So it's a kind of idea borrowed from Steinitz rather than a direct idea from him. White wants to play the position slowly and just avoid any complicated variations. Well, black plays b5, bishop b3. The game develops quietly now, and now white probes on the queen side with a4. Bishop d7 is the most economical reply from black, and that's what Aronian does, just refusing to make any concessions, protecting the rook on a8 should white take on b5. White continues the quiet theme of the opening by playing c3, and black castles. Knight bd2, traditional Lopez skirmishes, knight a5, bishop c2, and now black stakes his claim on the queen side with c5. White goes rook e1, black goes rook e8, and now McShane drops his knight back to f1. Again, very traditional in the Ruy Lopez. The knight may come to g3 to add a kingside attack, or it may come to e3, putting pressure on both d5 and f5. If the white knight goes to e3, I think white's certainly looking at a move like knight d5 one day. Aronian's knight is doing nothing on the side, so it returns to c6, and white brings his knight into e3. Whereupon black plays b4, and this is the first real sign that black is starting to think about counterplay on the queen side. Well, this way of playing for white is all very well, but it doesn't put any direct pressure on black's position. My impression is that black has already got a satisfactory game, albeit in a complicated position. You know, this is a sort of situation where the better player is going to win. And McShane plays another traditional Lopez move here, pawn up to h3. Now, the reason white plays that in the absolute main line of the Lopez is to take away bishop g4 from black. In this current situation, that move is not really any sort of threat. I think h3 is played more to give white's attack a more substantive look to it. White could be thinking about g4 one day. Going back in the game Kamsky versus Leko, Dresden 2008, Kamsky just settled for bishop b3, putting his bishop on a more influential diagonal. Black played rook b8, and white broke in the centre with d4. But once again, black maintained a coherent position after e takes d4, and this game was drawn in 38 moves. But h3, okay, that just maintains the tension, and black played rook b8, a similar sort of move. Knight c4. I suppose the difficulty from white's perspective is it's hard to see an ongoing plan long term, let's say. I mean, white can shunt the pieces out with, let's say, bishop d2, but that doesn't really give the impression that it's going to put any substantive pressure on black. Knight c4, well, white might be thinking about a5 and knight b6, so black moves to stop that with bishop e6. And this forces McShane to make a small judgment call in the position. He could go knight g5 and allow black to double the c-pawns. Black can take on c4, take on c3, and then go queen a5. It's difficult to make a truly accurate judgment about this position. Which is more important, the damage to white's queen side or white's two bishops? Although this bishop's locked in behind the pawns, one can't help but feel that bishop could have an awful lot of potential the way the game goes. But McShane decides to play it very safe, and he just plays bishop b3. So black plays h6, taking away knight g5, and white plays bishop e3, again refusing to make any clear decision just yet about where he's going. Now white could have played d4, a move which he's arguing is better delayed in this variation. But I don't think this causes black any difficulty at all. Far from it. Black would liquidate the pawns on d4, draw the white queen out into the open, and then I think knight d7 produces a position which is very active for black and pretty good. White could try to refine this variation after he takes d4 by trying bishop f4, but again, rook c8 gives black a fully playable game. Well, more than that really. All his pieces are in active play. You can't wish for more than that from the black side of a Lopez. So McShane again plays quietly, bishop e3, but this allows Aronian to take the initiative now by taking on c3 and playing d5. And the first tactical point of this move is seen if white plays knight f takes e5. Then black takes, plays rook takes b3, and then d4, with a discovered attack against the queen, attacking the bishop on e3. So that wins material for black. So McShane took on d5, knight takes d5, queen c2, and now another very good move by Aronian, pawn up to e4. And suddenly we see that all these quiet ideas from white in the opening haven't really brought anything tangible at all. Far from it, as black now seems to be assuming the initiative. Well, e4 is a very dangerous move. It puts the question to the entire white position. And we now get a forcing sequence. McShane took on e4. Black took on e3. White took back with the rook. And now the point of it all, rook takes b3. And then knight a5. With an embarrassing situation for white on the queen side. And so embarrassing is it that McShane is forced to sacrifice his queen. So knight takes a5. Bishop takes b3. Knight takes b3. And so we reach a very unbalanced situation here, where white has got a rook, a knight, and a pawn for the queen, but his position is very fractured. There seems to be two distinct halves to the white position. You've got the queen side cluster, and you've got the king side cluster. And with the knights, it might be difficult to bring it all together. Black's better, but of course it's not easy to pin this position down. The first thing black's got to do is get organised. So it's a question of where he wants his queen. He could have played queen d7. That looks pretty coherent. But Aronian plays queen b6 instead. And white joins up the dots. In comes the black queen. And now McShane plays rook a e1. Again, more concerned with protecting all his pieces to avoid tactical accidents than anything else. If white plays rook b1, then queen a2 is a little bit awkward, buying up the a4 pawn. But I'm not sure in the long run that actually white can prevent black from simply taking that pawn, long term. Well, rook d8 attacking the knight. Knight drops back, pawn up to c4, just letting the bishop in the game, really. White plays knight e5, attacking the pawn. Bishop c5, counter-attack. Rook f3, and now queen to b3. What black wants, really, is to be able to take this pawn, then march the a-pawn all the way up the board. That's the way he's going to win this position. So white plays a5, slowing down the process. And now rook d6. Bit of a surprising move, that, because it allows white to take on f7. But I think Aronian is enticing McShane to uncoordinate his position. Now, if we just go back, I think a lot of people were expecting f6 here. Knight g4, and now rook d3. Yes, black can play this way. I'm not sure whether that's better or worse than the game. White's position looks more connected here than it does in the game when McShane comes down and takes on f7. Aronian plays his idea, rook f6. There is another exchange, and white is allowed to take one more pawn on h6. But you see what Aronian is trying to do. He's spread out the play. He's playing on both sides of the board, and this is where the queen and bishop shine over the knights. White, for his part, would very much like to keep the action firmly located on one side of the board, namely the king side. but he can't do that. So rook d1, and black plays queen b4. Knight takes f6, king f7. There may have been some mileage here in bishop takes f2 check, and if king takes f2, queen b2 check, picking up the knight. King e2, and now queen e5. This was a definite alternative to what Aronian does. In the game he plays king f7, knight comes to d5, and now it's a question of whether white can defend against this oncoming pawn. White's position's quite together here. He hits the bishop, bishop drops back, rook f5 check, king e8, and now McShane comes forward with g4, making the critical decision to sacrifice the knight after c2. Knight takes c2, queen takes c2, knight g3. And now we reach this extraordinarily unbalanced position where white's only got a rook for the queen, but he's got 4 extra pawns, and they are a significant armada of pawns which could set sail towards the black king at any moment. Can black win this? Well, let's see. Black's still interested in rounding up that a pawn, so he plays queen c7. White plays knight h5, and now bishop d8. King g2. Black's plan is crystal clear. He wants to take the a pawn and queen his own a pawn, but he's got a small matter of defending against the kingside onslaught from white. Queen a4 was answered by h4, and finally black gets the chance to nab that pawn. Rook f5, king e6, knight f4, king d7, and now white played f3, trying to keep things as tight at the back as he can. Aronian infiltrates with both bishop and queen, but white's got an outlet on h5. I suppose the main advantage of this play by black is that it ties down white's kingside pawns. If white plays h5 now, then it's mate in 1. So McShane plays knight g6 in the game. Black plays a5, slow but steady. Rook f7 check, king d8. It takes a long time for black to win this position. And now e5. Pawn up to a4, pawn to e6, bishop b4 stopping the pawn, e7 check, and now we get this, again, very significant sequence as bishop takes e7, knight takes e7, is now answered by queen c5. King comes to h5. Black plays a3. White's still rather disjointed here. King h6, a2, and I don't think white could stop this pawn, he never could. Pawn up to g6. Well, Aronian plays queen c4. I think he can also queen the pawn here, and if g7, then queen a6 check, and now I think white has a choice of losing moves. If he plays knight g6, then I think we go queen e3 check, king h7, and now queen to e8. I think this move actually terminates the game here and now. Going back to a1 queen, g7 check, queen a6 check. If king h7, we can go queen h5 check, king g8, and now queen c4. Again, terminating the game. Aronian decides to play queen c4, knight f5, a1 queen, and now we reach another extraordinarily unbalanced position here, as after queen takes f3, white is forced to under-promote to a knight. He can't take a queen here because of queen h5 check, and then queen b1 check, leading to mate. Obviously rook f5 is answered by queen takes f5, queen b takes f5. So g8 knight, queen h5, of course there's no way that the knights can hold out against the queens in this position. It's just a rather picturesque and highly unusual situation. King g6 is answered by queen e6 check, and king g7 by queen g5 check. The queens close in for the kill, and after king f8, McShane has allowed checkmate in 1 move. He could not, just going back, play his king onto the h-file because of the simple queen g6. And once again, the queens triumph and dominate completely the rook and 2 knights. So I don't think I've ever seen a material balance like that with all the pawns gone in such a high-class game for a very, very long time. And what a game that was, an extraordinary struggle between 2 great players. But that was the London Chess Classic all over, replete with interesting play.